Welcome to I Had No Idea. Safe and healthy use for technology for our kids. There's one kid that benefits from this, if there's one family that benefits from something that we talk about, then the whole thing's worth it.
Welcome to I Had No Idea, Cyber Empowerment. This is a podcast about helping us all be more aware of the things that are going on in the cyber world so we can make sure that we keep our youth safe, that we are connected in how we are going forward with trying to live in a technology dependent world. I have with me today Maurine Molak. Y'all, she is a legend in this work. We go way back. We can talk about this from years past, working on projects, and she is a champion in the cyber safety world, especially for youth. And I'm just going to start, Maureen, by just opening the door for you to tell us about you and tell us about your journey and how this all started for you to be a pioneer in online safety for kids.
Jeni, thank you so much for inviting me today to tell my story and also provide some hope to parents out there, because when we lose hope, that's when terrible things happen. And I know that firsthand with my son, David. A little bit about him. He was the youngest of three boys. There was a large age gap between my older boys and David. He grew up in the early 2000s, and when technology was rapidly changing. I mean, we had dial-up internet in our home when my older boys, were in elementary school. And so David saw all the rapid advancements, and he was always drawn much more to technology than my older two boys. And I really contribute that to that period of time when he was developing and growing up and experiencing all of those changes. Even though he did have he was much more drawn to it, he had balance in his life. He was a great basketball player. He had lots of friends. And it wasn't until after a serious basketball injury when he was in high school that we started to see his experience with social media and online gaming change. And over a period of about 8-9 months, as he was rehabbing from this serious injury, he was spending all of his free time on technology and on these platforms. And after about 8-9 months, we started to see a real change in his behavior. He was showing all of the signs of a behavioral addiction, from lying about completing his homework. He was sneaking around using his devices when they were supposed to be locked up in the kitchen. He would get angry and aggressive when we would try to get him to stop. And then there towards the end, he started stealing from us in order to purchase virtual assets to increase his player power through some of these gaming platforms. David was a smart kid, but he knew that there was something wrong with his behavior, and we were seeking mental health supports for him to try to get through this. And that's when he became the target of cyberbullying by a group of classmates at his school, even to the point to where we moved schools to get away from the perpetrators. But what we didn't understand at the time is that cyberbullying doesn't require geographic proximity, and it followed him to his new school. David lost hope. He thought he was never going to be able to get away from this experience online, and he had this online persona that he thought was so damaged by the cyberbullying, and it was the final match on a huge bonfire that exploded in our home, and David took his life at the age of 16.
Wow, that is just so, it's heart-wrenching to hear. I've known this story in your work for many years now, both in Texas and now nationally. And it's never lessened to understand how devastating that impact is and how that loss is. And what a lot of folks don't know about the law itself is that our bullying laws, especially here in Texas, were just about bullying incidents that happened on a bus or in a school or in a football stadium or on school property. And David's law was groundbreaking because it allowed schools to have the opportunity to have intervention, especially when we do know that the individuals involved may all be enrolled in the same school. Now, it still reaches for protecting students, even if those perpetrators may be outside the school or may be unknown, but it opened the door for so much to happen that hadn't happened before. What things have you learned or heard or just in your work and through David's legacy, which I want you to definitely speak more about? How much of an impact would you say that this has had over the years? This has gone on almost a decade now. Is that correct?
It's hard for me to believe it's been 10 years that I've been working on these issues. After David died, you can imagine it was really hard for me to get out of bed for many months, but we knew that we wanted to honor him and use our experience of really hitting certain roadblocks, whether that was through the school, through law enforcement, through legal action, and making sure that parents, students, and schools had the tools that they needed to be able to address, particularly cyberbullying that occurred off campus outside of school hours. We knew that the laws just had not kept up with the rapidly evolving technology and the way kids were interacting with one another online. And so, David's Law, it's a comprehensive bill. It was not perfect back in 2017 when it passed and was signed by Governor Abbott, but it really paved the way for us to have some additional conversations. I had a lot of people that came alongside me and wanted to be a part of the solution to address these issues. And we've continued to work on legislation, and prevention is something that we added to David's Law in 2021. And we've seen, the health teaks change. We've seen this Texas School Safety Center get behind a lot of the initiatives to keep kids safe online. So we're having different conversations now than what we were having 10 years ago when I first started having these conversations with people. They looked at me like I was a unicorn, and that what David experienced was unique. And what we know now is it was not unique back then. It is not unique now. And people are really waking up to the damage that some of these online experiences can cause.
Wow. And when you say not unique, because I think, and I use the word uncover. We've uncovered. It's not like we've discovered the large amount of harm that's happened as much as we've uncovered that it was happening, and now we're trying to do things to stop it, to be more helpful. Was that one of the things that you might have found when you first started to become the advocate for cyberbullying prevention and had to take those first steps? I mean, you just mentioned how horrible it was to even just move forward, understandably, after losing David. What steps did you take to move in the direction for where you are today?
Well, I told my story. My husband and I took turns every week. One of us was in Austin, telling our story and advocating for David's Law. And, it really moved the needle for people to understand it firsthand. And we just went in and we just told the truth. We told people about the challenges that we experienced as a family. And, I often think back of lots of the parents who reached out to me who had similar experiences as David did, as our family was, suffering from. And I don't know, why we got the black bean. I don't know why our story stuck. But I do, understand that, his story was one that got a lot of public media attention. And it just provided an opportunity. And we just knew that David's story, David's life, what he experienced could not be in vain, and that we had to use it for good to save other children, because that is what David would want us to do. So yeah, the conversations are very different today that I'm having than I was having 10 years ago. But we just keep having those conversations.
Wow. And it is, I think, that because there have been videos, media, there are things that you can see. And we saw David, we saw snippets of David's life. And that's where you can see this is a kid that could be any kid. It's not like you said, it's a horrible, horrible situation. And we've learned since then how many victims have fallen to cyberbullying, to online predatory advances, to now AI chatbot things that are happening. They're they're not in a developmental stage where the interaction is appropriate for them. Both mentally, emotionally, behaviorally. I just think that that's something that is not as widely understood by all of us out in the world, especially in our generation. We didn't grow up this way. We
Right.
didn't have the devices. So a video game it was Nintendo, it was Atari, if you want to go back that far.
Yeah.
Those are things that were so foreign, and it seems like that's such a barrier. So it leads us into the next question about, you know, sometimes the perception is it's just kids being kids, or it's just they just shouldn't pay attention. I mean, what would you say about that perception when it can be so invasive and happening 24/7, where cyberbullying in the school, it would happen between two people, but when you go home in online world, it still reaches them. What would you say about that?
I don't know if you saw this yesterday, Jenny, but Health and Human Services and the U.S. Surgeon General's office put out a new advisory, and it discussed about all of the online harms out there, and it gave recommendations to families, to policymakers, to all of the people that have a stake in these issues when it comes to online child safety. And their research showed that 5 out of 10 kids experience cyberbullying in their lifetime. So that's half of the kids online. So that number is increasing in this world that we live in today. So I think it's important for parents to understand the magnitude of it. And probably the most important thing that they can do is to teach their children what to do in those situations, because most likely it is going to happen to your child, or it's going to happen to somebody that is your child's friend. And so teaching our kids to have each other's backs, how to report these particular situations, how to engage with a trusted adult, and what to do if that trusted adult doesn't take action, or what they can do as the next step. I often tell the story about, David's cyberbullying that occurred on Instagram, and how there were a lot of bystanders that were watching this happen to David. They weren't engaging in the post, but they knew it was happening. And after David died, those kids and their parents came to us and said that the children had told their parents that night, had said, look what these people are doing to David. Look what these my peers at my school are doing to David. And their parents told them, don't engage. It may turn on you. And so with their grief and their shame of not reporting and not doing more in that particular situation and that terrible outcome, we've got to teach our kids not the bystander effect, that it's got to be you. Don't think it's going to be somebody else. We have got to be able to stand up and have our friends' backs. So really, really important for the bystander.
That is hugely important. And when you're talking about 50%, that turns it from a if your kid is cyberbullied to a when your kid is cyberbullied, almost, because of the enormity of that and the psychological, the mental and emotional anguish that can happen with that. And a lot of times, and I will say this, Maureen, and I encourage parents to understand, when I talk to students who tell me, because I interview kids and I'll ask them, what's the thing that worries you? What have you seen? And some of the language they have, it's so sad, because now a good number of them are expecting it. They're expecting it. And I'll say, okay, then what will you do about it? Almost always they tell me something they do independently that doesn't involve letting a trusted adult know. And I ask them why. And they'll tell me, I'm afraid my mom or dad will take the phone away.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to say to a parent that a break or a screen, as I call it, a screen time diet or whatever, I'm never going to say that that's not appropriate. But what I do advocate is what you went back to a moment ago, with conversations, with a relationship, with understanding that you have to be a partner with your child to solve these problems when we can know about this. And the other side of it is what you said, the bystander effect. The individuals that understood the enormity of that now have to live with what they wish they could have done, and in teaching our kids that responsibility of, hey, if something is not going right, come to me so we together can. And there are now portals, there's ways in community online to block, to shut down, to report. Those are all things I would imagine we need to teach kids to use, and the
Absolutely.
ability to establish offline healthy relationships to know their work. There's so many things I wish we could get to vulnerable youth before these horrible things happen. So thank you for saying that. And we as parents, we've got to be aware and engaged in that fight. So I want us to turn to the important work that you're doing in COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act. Folks, if you haven't looked this up and you haven't learned about Maureen and many other parents, important work through Parents SOS, and hopefully you can kind of give us both of those. Talk about those things right now and where we stand with that.
Yeah, I was busy doing all of my Texas work here. And so, not only just passing David's Law, but helping pass some suicide prevention and some other bills out there that we were successful at passing that would hold platforms accountable in Texas for harm to children. And the last 4 years, I have been working on the Kids Online Safety Act, which is a federal bill, working with parents who have lost children. Some have lost children to suicide after cyberbullying. We have parents who have lost children after to suicide after sextortion, which you and I have had many conversations about, Jeni, and also dangerous online challenges and the mental health, the depression and anxiety, and the mental health effects of screen overuse and social media addiction. So we have been working on this bill for 4 years now, and it passed in the Congress, in the Senate, U.S. Senate in 2024, 91-3. You don't hear of a bill that popular in the United States Senate. This was obviously a bipartisan bill that everybody was getting, almost everybody was getting behind. All but 3 members got behind it. And it is it's really a common sense bill. It is safety by design, requires the companies to design their features like those features that are addicting our children, the auto scroll, the video autoplay, the constant notifications, the reward system, those types of things that are getting at the core business model that they want to, keep our kids on these platforms for as long as possible and have them be users for life. And so getting, to the safety by design and then safety by default. I often hear from parents, and I'm sure you do too, about how hard it is because every platform is different. All of the safety features are different in all of these different platforms. And so making sure that the platforms have the highest protective settings set by default, so a parent doesn't have to figure that out. Now they can have the authority to go in and relax those safeguards if they want to, but we want those on by default. And there's also some transparency requirements and some reporting features that are really important when we're talking about cyberbullying, that the platforms actually have to take action and have some processes and procedures in place that will actually meaningfully help a child who is the target of these bad behaviors online.
Wow, that is enormous. And it does take a lot of studying to understand. And we're busy in our lives. I get that. But the advancements that have been happening, especially as you said, are constructed, are designed. And in my world, we call that intermittent reinforcement. And it becomes an addictive pattern, almost like kind of like gambling in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it that way, because there's always this draw for engagement and a desire to dominate the attention of the user. It's so hard. It's hard as adults, but for young children, it's nearly impossible to step away or not be sucked into that. 91.3 is unbelievable. You know what that means to me? We know it's a problem. We know it's a problem now. And to me, a danger unmitigated is a danger created. So the responsibility definitely rests with those who can do more on that. And you sharing that work is so important. And with parents, SOS is Parents for Safe Online Spaces. Uh, that is, to me, a huge movement. And you and other partners, and like you said, with sextortion, with the online challenges, parents who've lost kids who have been challenged to do these things and they've not survived them. Physically, their lives have ended over that. That work is so enormous. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah,
So
I think it's
I asked,
also important to note that, these children who have died from these online challenges, like those challenges were pushed to them through the algorithm. They were not searching for the choking challenge or the blackout
wow.
challenge. And so all of these parents that I've worked with whose children experienced that online, and they were pushed these challenges, but they also do these challenges in order to get that, like you said, like that reinforcement, those
Mm,
likes, those clicks,
mm,
those
mm,
comments, and they
mm,
just go terribly wrong, and
mm,
they do not survive them, and children are dying from these online challenges. And we've heard about the subway surfing challenges, and so these types of dangerous challenges that get pushed through the algorithms, that's
mm,
actually
mm,
part of COSA also
mm,
would
mm.
would stop that.
Wow. It makes me wonder, if the algorithm is happening and it was programmed at some point, now it's more than likely 100% being run by AI. If AI can be run to push the algorithm, why can AI not be run to stop it? Why can it not be a useful safeguard? If that's where we're supposed to go, and
Yep.
we're supposed to use this new advanced, incredibly advanced technology, why are we not setting it up yet in a way that has more protection? Because it saves the manpower. If there's going to be a force that's not used in a healthy way, I want to see the angel AI. I want to see the guy that comes in and says, we're going to shut this down. We're going to block it. We're going to protect the kid. We know this is a youth. This is what's going to happen. So I'm for the angel. I'm for the good guys. We're gonna try to see if we can't use the technology for the good guys.
Yeah.
So when you're talking to legislators, what have you found has been the most difficult thing? You do not have to name any names, but what part of that conversation, because that is just taking relentless amount of time to educate, to connect, to implore the help of those who are making these decisions. What are the things that are the nuts and bolts a little bit in some of that work?
Jenny, I think probably the hardest thing for the parents are, we go to Washington, D.C., and we tell our story of the very worst days of our lives over and over again to try to get change. And,
Mm-hmm.
they'll often tell us what we want to hear. There's been, 40 something hearings in Washington, D.C. about this
Mm-hmm.
issue. I was there in January of 24 when the big tech CEOs were there, and it was the infamous Mark Zuckerberg turning around and apologizing to us for
Oh
what
yeah.
we had, experienced on his platforms. It was a very
Mm-hmm.
shallow apology, and the Senate senators that were there in that room, they had a lot of really great sound bites, I mean, so it's a lot of talk, but it's not enough action as far as I'm concerned. And, we really need Congress to step in and put federal safeguards in place. And I think, fighting the big tech lobby is what we're up against right now. I mean, we are all parents going to Washington, D.C. on our own dime. We are
Mm-hmm.
taking time off from our families and our work to go do this. And we'll walk out of an office and two lobbyists from the big tech companies will walk in behind us. And so
Wow.
we are up against it's a David and Goliath fight. And they have millions and millions of dollars that they are throwing at this bill and other online safety bills, not only, in the states, but federally. And, it's because we are trying to get at their core business model. We are telling them our kids are off limits. You cannot addict our children to these platforms, and that's what they don't want to see.
Wow. There's been some. some research, some commentary, I would say more so about Silicon Valley creating and yet shielding their own children from the screen time or enforcing the balance that you talked about. You know, that was what was happening for David, and that's what we advocate for children to be outside, to do things, to have relationships, to have face-to-face conversations. I think it's very telling to create something if it's something that has that degree of power, and yet we're not putting at least the same level of investment on the safety side of it. You know, the same balance of not just protecting my kid, but protecting your kid, protecting all kids to, like you said, educate kids to watch out for each other. We know on the platforms that they go on when they are in the main space on some games, not much is going to, happen that's terribly nefarious. There's a stronger possibility that someone might interact and say, hey, dude, that's too much. That's too far. Don't do that. But the kids are going into chat rooms, they're going into direct messages or the DMs. And that's where some of those bad things are taking place, or they're sent those text and pictures and videos that they just aren't prepared for what to do with that. And that's one of the things that's the big focus for I Had No Idea is uncovering that. Kids educate me literally every day about something. I will go to a school and I will speak to students about strong passwords, not trusting profile pictures. If someone asks you for this, don't send it. You don't have to do this. You don't have to give that much of yourself. I know you want likes. I know you want to be viral, but it's so amazing when I'll say, hey, what's the latest platform? What are we using these days, guys? What are we into? And they'll tell me. They will flat out tell me. And I'm going mind blown for how you can take a piece of Roblox and you can make your own game and you can monetize it. And kids are actually earning thousands of dollars sometimes.
I
And
know.
their parents knows this. And they're just like, your mom or dad doesn't even know this. This is huge.
It is huge. Yeah, I don't know if you heard that on Roblox they have a game on there now that simulates the Uvalde shooting. And yes, and so we have an interim charge this year to discuss Roblox in the state
Wow.
legislature, Texas legislature. Yeah.
When I do presentations, Maureen, I talk about, technology is a tool, and I'm not going to say things are good or bad, but what I will say is the ones that are so much more magnetized for the potential predatory advances, for the opportunity for cyberbullying, for things. There are some places that the dark things are happening more on maybe than others. We were talking to Scrolling to Death just recently. We were
Mhm.
having a podcast for Scrolling to Death with Nikki Petrosa. We were talking to Heidi, who is doing great work with a platform that can help rate that. Parents need to know about for wired parents. Parents need to know about those things to connect and be helpfully educated on that and spread the word on that. So that is just mind blowing to me. Yes, we will be discussing Roblox. We're going to have some gamer folks on the podcast to help with that too. But we got to know
Good.
about all of it. We got to know about all of that. So for the parent or educator who's listening and they get overwhelmed because there's so much, what is something that you would say is a great walk away from this conversation? What does safe technology look like? What are some success stories or good things we can do as we know kids are going to be using technology and screens from the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for an older child, I think it's important to talk to them about the business model and how they are the product of these social media companies, and everything about them is being sold to advertisers. That's one thing that I've learned from kids is they don't like to feel like they're being manipulated by adults. Well, these
Mm-hmm.
social media platforms are manipulating them to try to get them to be a user for life. So talking to them about the business model and getting them to understand it from that perspective and not allowing those companies to do that to them in a way where they are actually earning, billions and billions of dollars on the backs of children. I think for
Yeah.
parents, I think it's also really important. The main thing that you can do is
Mm.
delay as long as you possibly can before they get a smartphone, before they get social media, and
Mm-hmm.
make sure that when you do let them have these devices and social media, that they're talking to them about how they're going to use it. And are they going
Mm,
to be a passive user, or are they going to be an engaged user? And as they're engaging in it, are they using it for good? And to actually what their goals are in life, to actually be able to achieve those goals using social media in a way that they can achieve those.
mm,
And monitor
mm,
their screen time, and monitor what's happening online, but don't do it uh, privately. Make sure that they understand that you are doing that because you care about them and you want to keep them safe. And there will be a time when you will not monitor as much, as you have built that trust with them and that you see how
mm,
they're interacting online. And the one non-negotiable, and I can speak from my own experience and wish that I had done differently, is to not allow these devices in their room at night.
mm.
Give them a clock, an old-fashioned clock, because they'll say, oh, they need to have their phone in order to be able to wake up in the morning. You be their alarm clock, or you
Yeah,
provide, one of those old-fashioned clocks for them.
sure.
But that should be a non-negotiable there. And until there's actually legislation that requires these companies to have safety by design, we are up against a losing battle. These are the most sophisticated platforms out there. They hire, behavioral scientists to understand how they can addict people onto these platforms. And we're adults, and if we decide that we want to use it, knowing all of the risks out there, that's up to us. But when we're talking about children, we need to have safety by design, and we won't be able to protect our kids
Mhm.
until we have that.
Absolutely. And you hit on some important things about talking about how to use. I use the analogy of don't throw the keys to a vehicle to a kid at the age of 10 and then be expected to learn or drive. There's the same amount of potential dangers can be to using a vehicle as there is to using your device. People can get hurt. You can hurt yourself. You can fall, something can happen if you're not trained and as you said, that message, learn and monitor with them and make sure they understand. I mean, if the child has the maturity to understand the degree of concern or what I call the trap doors they could fall through, tell them, I do this because I want you to be safe. I'm locking this down for now because I don't want someone to come at you and ask you for the image or the picture or to try to cyberbully you. This is because I love you that I'm doing this. And when you talk about legislation, and there was something that we talked about, definitely coming back to, I want us to just hit on the Scope Act, which is kind of David's Law 2.0, real quick before we get off, and then real quick, the Texas Trago Law, the Responsible Artificial Governance Act. Those are two big things I feel like that are on the horizon. I don't feel like a lot of folks know enough about them for what can happen for online safety or for individuals who do harmful things. So tell me a little bit about Scope.
Yeah, so SCOPE is Securing Children Online Through Parental Empowerment. That's what it stands for.
Love
And
it.
it is our Texas law,
Mhm.
and it is a COSA styled bill. So
Okay.
it's actually not David's Law 2.0. That is a separate
Oh, it is. Okay.
it is,
My
yeah.
apologies.
That's a separate law, but scope, it does try to get at what we're trying to do with the Kids Online Safety Act. Which is it's more focused on content than the Kids Online
Mm,
Safety Act really focuses on those design features. Like, we want to make sure that no matter what passes, it stands up in a court of law. So scope is now being challenged by those trade groups out there because they're saying it's a violation of First Amendment. And so it has not made its way through the court system. Part of the bill is the judge allowed it to go through, and part of it is still held up in the court system. So I think what it's important for parents to know is, like, what are these platforms supposed to be doing in Texas? And they are supposed to be providing a parent who has a minor child on a platform, if you can prove that you are the guardian of that child, you have certain responsibilities and authority to do things on that platform that help keep your kids safe. And we know that the platforms are not following that piece, and our Attorney General is suing a lot of these companies right now because they are in violation of the Scope Act. So important to watch that. We in Texas really care about online safety. We have done a great job. Other states look at Texas because we are paving the way. TREGA is one of those bills, and we're in discussions right now about how can we integrate chatbots into TREGA or a new bill, because that is an emerging technology that we have to be able to address, because there are kids who are developing relationships with these chatbots. These chatbots are telling them terrible things to do to themselves and to their parents. We have to be able to protect young people from that. So I think we'll see that movement next session in Texas. And there are some bills right now federally that may also pass this Congress. So more on that soon.
Okay. Wow. And for folks that don't know, and thanks for that clarification. And I do love the fact that there's different pockets that are trying to address, all of that. Sometimes we feel like we're playing whack-a-mole, that as soon as we try to address one thing that's going on, there's another one. And the Texas Responsible Artificial Intelligence Governance Act, which I'm proud of Texas, because at first, it was kind of the Wild West about AI, and there won't be any regulation, there won't be any guardrails. And Texas kind of paused and said, well, wait a minute. We don't want to infringe on other people's on constitutional rights. We want to not have the involuntary use of biometric tracking, dark patterns, deep fakes. Those are all words emerging in the AI world right now. And I'm very thankful that while we are kind of the second place in addition to California right now, developing a lot of technologies, this is trying to move alongside of that. So that to me is showing movement, and I'm excited about that. And the COSA style, like you said, it's about design, and Scope is more of that content. And I feel like it's something that parents can get in their hands and they can say, I do have a resource, or I do have the ability to intervene on behalf of my child. So thank you. So tell us about David's Law 2.0 then, to make sure that has its credence before we kind of wrap up for today. Tell us a little bit about that work.
Yeah, David's Law 2.0 is where we went back into David's Law, and we were able to put some prevention in schools that we tried to do in 2017, but it didn't get in the final bill. And so coming back in later on, after we realized what is missing, what school districts using best practices. I worked with Texas Education Agency, TEA, and there are some rules that schools have to follow regarding prevention and surveying students. If we don't have the data, if we don't know what's really happening in our schools, how can we fix a problem? And so having that information is really key to understanding what's happening on each individual campus. Like I love our school districts. I am a public school person, graduated from a public school, and know that most school districts are doing everything that they possibly can to address these issues. Yes, are there some out there that I think could do a better job? Of course. Maybe they have limited resources, and I'm sure that they have their reasons why. But we wanted to make sure that schools had a framework that they had to follow, and that they had some flexibility in there on what they do. So it's it's having lessons around cyberbullying and bullying. It is gathering the data. It is making sure that every campus has a committee that is made up of community members, parents, students, educators, to be able to look at that data that's coming out of the schools and be able to determine what else do they need to do in order to reduce the rates of bullying and cyberbullying. So it's prevention, and just, thrilled with how TEA came about it, and hoping that most school districts are embracing that.
I appreciate it very much because they know we all know that has been for a long time a big focus on how schools are just running day to day, that they were fighting that already. And I appreciate how you frame that because it is true. The vast majority of public schools in Texas and other states, I'm sure, are doing the best they can with what they have. They're trying to educate children, and they're trying to keep up with a changing time. We're in an unprecedented time in technology in our lives right now. And you use the term framework and flexibility. So something that gives guardrails, something that gives that expectation, but gives you the opportunity to ask those questions because it's going to impact our kids. And now with the new laws in Texas, anyway, about having cell phone free classrooms, we're still tracking and learning. This is our first year of that happening. We'll know more probably through the summer for how that really went down. But if we don't ask and we don't have an assessment, we're not going to know what the outcome of that is. So that's very much appreciated. And also shout out to TEA and to the Texas School Safety Center for that collaboration, important work there. Well, what you are doing is literally pioneer work, Maureen. I know it's not the first time I've told you that. I'm in all the times we've gotten to spend together, to visit, to present together, to do things. You are a mentor in this field, and I have sincere appreciation to you for all the hard work that you've done, and to honor David, and how many lives I would venture to say have been saved for this work, unifying with other parents. So thank you for that. I do want to shout out to David's Legacy. So you can reach David's Legacy by going to, is it www.davidslegacy.com? To make sure I got that correct? .org. Okay, .org. www.davidslegacy.org, all one word, where you can find more resources that Maureen and her team have put together. Just fabulous, fabulous work. Also encourage you to listen to this podcast. You can, once we have this posted on our site, for I Had No Idea Cyber Empowerment. So our website is www.ihadnoideace.com for I Had No Idea Cyber Empowerment. And we just appreciate this and want everyone to have all the awareness they can so we can keep kids safe online. So Maureen, I thank you, and hope we get to get together very, very soon.
Thank you so much, Jenny.